gaat nog zeer goed daar in aanzien over het Belgisch kampioenschap op Dummy. En dat vallen hoor. Dus en u weet het, het is ook een Toyota snelste ronde. De eerste 3 snelste ronden te krijgen punten. En dan wordt dan op de einde van het seizoen allemaal samengesteld. En dan gaan we uiteraard naar een racing toe. Onder dat.
the leading riders.
Yeah, Betsema.
Go on, Jeremy.
Coming back, last year at the end of the season, coming off of a bit of a break, we'll call it. She's now back. But technically having a little bit of trouble with these
as well. So the Credit Shop freestyle riders really having worked hard on their technical ability over the off season of cyclocross, and you're starting to see how big a difference that actually makes for the women now. And Yara Castellan still running those barriers, and you can see that the difference in speed for the other riders from that team as they're going across those barriers. And Betsema now just on this little run-up, she's opening up quite a nice little gap here.
Absolutely, yes. Super cool to see both those young riders jumping those barriers. It's really, that is definitely the future. I mean, there, you look back, 3-4 years ago, almost no women riders were really. That's not true as a statement. And then there were, Pauline Prévost was jumping the barriers back in the day. There were women that were jumping the barriers, but it's definitely as this young crop of riders, even younger than Celine Del Carmen Alvarado, Anna Marie Wurst, younger than that. The next generation after them is starting to jump the barriers as almost the status quo, and that's great to see, because that is definitely going to, it will ultimately become the status quo in 5 or 6 years. All of those riders are going to mature. They're all going to be jumping the barriers and really showcasing that technical skill and kind of where they came from and how the sport's evolved.
Yeah, and I think it will definitely be one of those techniques and skills that will be ultimately come down to be a bike winning or race winning technique to be possessing. I know there's certain races that are very, they have the barriers relatively close to the finish line, and with that, it's I think it's going to become more and more of a skill that you have to have. And it'd be interesting to see some of the older riders then whether they end up getting pushed into having to learn this. And I know if we're looking at the men's racing, someone like Lars van der Haar really having had a difficulty actually getting that right, as Betsema there just had a bit of an off on that corner.
Yep, you can see slow turn coming around that, and just not able to keep enough traction. The bars got kind of out of the rut, and then just took her down there. So no rider here. Very technical track, first race of the season. So going to see, riders are going to be getting used to some equipment, getting the tire pressures right. Making sure that they're riding these bikes at race pace. You can train a lot with your teammates. You can push yourself in a lot of ways, but to be able to get, that level of consistency over the course of 50 minutes to be able to push themselves like this, that is definitely a completely different story.
Yeah, it is. As I always say, the moment you pin a number on, the race devil comes out, the red mist goes down, and everything happens quicker. And obviously you're under I mean, you can train hard, but it's always a different feel to when you're actually getting out there in the racing and starting to push that a little bit harder, and obviously more riders around you and people taking different lines and so on. And we can see the different lines being taken there by Manon Bakker, going a little bit wider around that.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely see that where there's riders that are taking different lines. One, looking for more traction. You see Yara Castellan deciding to not take that rut there, to go around it, to, and that's one of those things where if you're in the flow, right, when you're riding that and you've got your leg out and you're ripping through there, then, you can let the bike kind of go, and you can just let that, like a train on tracks, take you through that turn. Whereas when you're going around the outside of it, there's a different thing that's happening. You need to scrub speed. You need to take a different, line, basically to get through it. You have to put down a lot slower, and then you come out of it a lot slower. So definitely it would behoove you to jump into that rut, but maybe she has not enough tire pressure. For instance, that would be, maybe there's some rocks in that rut that she's hitting with her tire. She needs to get a bike change, or she wants to keep that pressure, but that's the only rut on the course that she can't ride. But you see they're coming back together now, Magnus. Yeah. They're now, Betsema's gone in for a bike change. She obviously had some type of issue after that fall, and she's now back at the front here.
Yeah, it's all back together again as we see these three riders really starting to open up a good gap here. But Jeremy, when the course is starting to dry up in certain areas, as we see it's doing, the mud is becoming that bit stickier than what it was when it was super wet. The tire change, the tire choices and the tire pressures, does that change during the race? And if so, who makes the call of how to change the pressure?
Yeah, I mean, they'll be talking to their pit crew. You know, they'll be just giving them instructions. Hey, I need to go up, you know, whatever, 1 bar, 1 psi. They'll be asking them in the pit when they're going back on the other side. So as they do a 180 through the pit, they'll say, hey, go up or down a little bit in the pressure, and they'll definitely have a plan of attack, just like a time trial rider would if they were going to be doing something like a pre-race recon or a warm-up. They would have a routine that they were going to follow, and they would also have practiced that with their crew. They're doing the same thing with their pit staff, and they're making sure that everyone's in sync. And this is, again, the first race of the season, so there could be tires that are, you know, just been glued up. There could be any number of things that are happening at the first race. Bolts that weren't tightened 100%, even though it's a professional level. People make mistakes. It happens.
Yeah, they definitely do. So we're coming out on the third lap out of the 5 that we got in today's race. And Aniek van Alphen really looking very, very strong here.
Absolutely, yes, she really is. So we see now, we're getting a sense of the riders that are coming through. It's looks like at the front it's Laura Verdanska, Sheeran Van Androoy also is up there. So this is an interesting change of things, because Betsema now has some riders to have to follow. She's going to note their pace. You know, riders at the top level of this sport, Magnus, are going to always be looking at kind of what other riders do right and what they do wrong, and taking notes throughout the entire race. This race, by anyone's imagination, cyclocross, you know, it's won in seconds, but this is still very close. Like Lucinda Braun and Yara Castellijn are not out of this race in any way.
No, definitely not. But it's interesting to see a young rider like Aniek van Alphen really up there last year, making strides towards the podium all of the time. Now moving across to a bigger setup with the Credit Shop Freestyle team, and with the coaching of from that team as well. There's another young rider that we see really starting to find and benefit from those bigger setup of cross teams that we have now, which I think is really important to see that, and interesting to see that how the teams are now starting to develop riders from a very young age and going all the way, taking them all the way up into the professional ranks.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I mean, they want to. You're seeing that also happen on the road. You know, Jumbo's doing that a lot. They've got, you know, all types of riders that they're taking on, and they're bringing them up from young all the way up, and they're trying to keep them within their ranks to develop familiarity, but to also be able to mold and shape the way that these riders are growing and as they're coming up. So you've seen Castellijn there as the race fatigue sets in, having a little bit of trouble getting through that sand section. So she's now coming through there, having to run that section, which is going to not only kind of put a lot of, I'll say, junk in the legs, it's also over time going to fluster her. She's going to come into that section, she's going to think to herself, I've had a problem with this last time, hopefully I don't this time, and then that's going to build the anxiety, and before you know it, it's going to be another error. So yeah, as we see here, these riders using the entire course, going way out on the outside, making like a big lollipop there through that section, as we see coming into the barriers, Magnus.
Yeah, again, see that Van Alphen back at jumping those ones. Denise Betsema having to run, and you can see the gap is straight away. It's about 30-40 meters that opens up just because you're able to jump those hurdles. Just checking the technique. What do you see, Jeremy?
Man, yeah, on the tops, you see Van Alphen there on the tops, and then you see Backer there using the hoods. So yeah, different styles, but that is putting Betsema under a little bit of pressure. And I'd say that maybe Betsema went out a little bit too hard. She does not seem as comfortable as she did earlier in the race. And again, I'm making kind of a blanket statement here, but it looks like these two riders though are really, really enjoying where they're at in their pace now. So they've sort of locked in how they ride the course, where they get on and off, where they decide that they're going to go use the course to its fullest extent. So they've locked in kind of how the race pace of this is here in the third lap, about halfway through this. Whereas it looks like Betsema, definitely had that punchy power off the line, but not as fluid as these other riders as we make it through the halfway point.
So, seeing as the two riders out front are teammates, would you suggest that they would use the strength of one rider on a certain section and put that rider first, and maybe use another rider for a different type of section, just to maximize how they get through each particular part of the course?
Man, I'm not sure if they have the time on the race course yet to be able to work with each other like that, given that they're new teammates, given that this is the first race of the year. I think right now we're watching a race where they're both going as fast as they can, and this is sort of nice. This is a nice to have, but this wasn't necessarily planned in any way.
No, definitely not. It's obviously the first race back as we are here now at the Rappencross.
Delicious.
Yeah, definitely. To see one of the riders here just losing the chain, I think. We see a lot of the riders, a lot of teams going towards the one-by system, so one chainring on the front of the bike. Some teams are still staying very much traditional with a two-by setup. What do you think is what's the difference in that in terms of your riding style, and is it just purely a sponsor setup, or is it something that the riders themselves would choose?
Man, it's so personal, there's not one size that fits all, but as we see these riders here popping off, this is one of those scenarios where maybe if you did have a double and you felt very comfortable with how it was working, you would shift down and try to pedal through a very steep section like that, as you see the difference in styles, riders kind of cutting across those ruts, with Betsema there in third place coming into the top, hopping back on, using that rut. So I really think that it's personal preference. Sometimes it does have to do with sponsors. So sponsors are saying and dictating sort of what they're using, but I think that really, if you're looking at, does it make sense for cyclocross? A one-by system does. It's cleaner, so meaning there's not a front derailleur to get caught up with mud and stuff like that. So it is a little bit cleaner. It's easier for the mechanics to clean afterwards. They can pull the chain off and get the inside of the ring. So the bike does have a little bit less maintenance associated with it. And if you think about that over the course of a season, everyone's a little bit happier for sure. And then you've just got to talk about kind of the gear range. But at this point, when you see the offerings from the big three, even Campagnolo now has come out with a gravel system, 13 speed, 9 in the bottom, and a 50 up top. I mean, you're hard pressed to say that there is a disadvantage to using a single ring setup with a clutch. So these derailleurs that they have really do help keep the chains on. They're very reactive, so they can take the bumps and stuff like that. But Magnus, as we look back towards the racing, we're starting to see a little bit of a stretch out here as you start to see these two riders from the Credit Shop Fridstad's program really starting to push the boundaries on each other.
Yeah, they definitely are. I mean, Manon Bakker here is second at the moment, is just on certain sections struggling to follow Aniek van Alphen just that little bit, and we know how technically good Aniek van Alphen is, but I think for me the biggest thing right at this moment is look at that gap that's opened up down to Denise Betsema. It's a massive one as we're now coming through the finish line here out onto the penultimate lap.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the thing that's interesting is I remember watching where we've seen a lot of Aniek van Alphen last year starting to mix it up at some of the smaller cross races, going head to head with Sanne Cant, really pushing the boundaries and making her really put her under pressure. I believe it was at St. Nicholas in Sandy Cross there on the beach. She was really pushing Sanne Cant. It was an exciting race to watch, but you've been just watching her continuously grow and move up, and now she's on a pro team. She's got that confidence. She's got that support system behind her. That's when we really start to see a rider flourish, is when they get that additional level of support, right? They get that extra equipment. They get that ability to start to work on themselves and focus more on the racing.
She's had a couple of years at that under 23. Aniek van Alphen going around this corner here now with Manon Bakker having caught up to her, so these two riders really are going very strongly indeed. And here comes Denise Betsema. Denise Betsema, I think, is looking like she rides her bike in a completely different way to what I would say, traditional cross rider does. She tends to pedal a very, very small gear, really, really high cadence all the time, and just it looks completely different. Do you think there is a difference in terms of, you know, on specific conditions, if you're riding that smaller gear with a higher sort of cadence, does that change depending on whether it's a muddy course or whether it's a dry course and so on?
You know, I'd say a lot of the riders are training for these heavier courses with a lot of low cadence intervals and different things like that to be able to push themselves, you know, when they do get into those scenarios where you've got to do a lot of low cadence work, then you've got to hop off the bike, then you've got to, you know, basically run with it. After doing that low cadence work, you end up having to have a lot of strength in your legs and in your back in particular, because you're pushing a big gear. You know, you always would hear about the tour riders always having a lot of, like, you know, finesse in their pedal stroke, a lot of high cadence work, you know, making sure that they're going up, you know, over 100 cadence. But in cyclocross, that's less real. You know, a lot of riders focus on you know, doing low cadence drills, 55 RPM, you know, for 7-8 minutes, then going back up, getting something high, then doing another interval at a lower cadence again. So you see riders really trying to focus on using that low cadence drills to be able to get that efficiency in the mud that gives you ultimately more traction.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like Lucinda Brand here now is caught up to Denise Betsema. Yara Castellane coming through. Still struggling a little bit in that sand section, not really getting the drive on the bike. And I don't know if, looking at it from my point of view, maybe not really sitting in the right sort of way on the bike to get that front wheel to steer and to go through it. As we're now coming up here now, Aniek van Alphen, Manon Bakker really looking very, very composed, the two Kriya Shop Freestarts riders.
Yeah, those two are just out front and really I think they're working off of each other now, right? So they're really starting to look at each other's lines. They're starting to push each other. There might even be a little bit of, like, you know, self-talk happening. Yeah, so I think that those two are really starting to kind of flow. I'm sure that there's good energy in the team right now. You know, there's a lot of positivity when you're at the first race of the season on a new team with new equipment. They've been doing trainings together. You've seen them on Instagram. You've seen this program getting together. Bakker also, after last year leaving, kind of having no support at the end of the season after leaving her previous team, comes into this season with a new team with a lot of motivation, wanting to really push the boundaries of what she believes in and believes in herself, and showcase herself to her new sponsors and to her new setup.
Yeah, and I bet Camille van der Bergen will be standing in the pits there now, absolutely rubbing his hands together as the two young riders that he's just signed, and they are out there really proving. And looking at Aniek van Alphen managing to ride that, how much of a difference does it make, do you think, in terms of when they get to the top here now, Aniek van Alphen riding it, Manon Bakker having to run that section? What's the difference in feel when you get there?
Yeah, it's just a lot of stress on the legs to ride something like that, but you can see that she's trying to push it and really trying to, you know, put Manon Bakker now on the back seat a little bit, trying to really extend anywhere she can. So it's going to benefit, you know, Aniek van Alphen just a little bit to be able to ride this section versus get off and run it, but it is going to put a little bit of lactic acid in the legs. So if you were doing that lap after lap, that'd be a big effort to do, but you can see as we get in the last, you know, lap of this race, basically, Magnus, that she's going to look for any area that she can to maximize and take an advantage, and that was where she decided, hey, I know that I can ride this section. Manon's going to have to get off, and I'm going to absolutely punch it here and see if I can get a small gap, because it doesn't take much in cyclocross.
No, it definitely doesn't. As Lucinda Brand continues to push that gap open towards Denise Betsema, who's, I think, as you said earlier, Jeremy, probably went out that little bit too hard, found herself on the front and tried to make that gap open up and stick and put the rest of the riders under pressure, but it ended up almost having to backfire, as we saw just Aniek van Alphen almost come in the cropper there.
Yep, and you see that backer there also having trouble. So this is definitely, you can tell that both these riders are on their limit now, right? So that definitely is what we expected, right? So Van Alphen now is pushing the pace to her maximum. She's at the top of her limit, and now you're starting to see backer also having trouble right there on the replay. So both these riders on the limit, trying to go as fast as they can. The worst thing that they could do is sabotage themselves right now. So they need to stay in control. They need to use a little bit of their maturity and their understanding of their racing for a long time to basically be able to take it down a notch. Just relax, get through this last lap. They've only got 10 minutes left. They just, that would be such a great victory for both these riders with this new program, new riders to the team to go 1 and 2. I know that Camille Vandenberg would be so excited to see this happen. And then we've got now a slow-mo of Yara Castellane coming through, just showing all that muck on the bike.
Yeah, definitely looks like it's quite a tricky one today, it seems, in terms of how much mud the tires are actually picking up. I'm surprised not to have seen more bike changes going on today, especially from these two front riders who now have quite a big gap opening up towards the third place rider Lucinda Brand. Maybe getting a new set of tires on there with completely fresh grip. What do you think?
It's one of those situations where if you're going to take a bike, then you're going to lose some time. I think on this, it's a very fast pit as well. You saw that's how we see Betsema come back, to these riders at first. So I wouldn't, if you didn't need a bike, I wouldn't suggest taking one. As you see there, Van Alphen really pushing the limits on this, with backer able to take back a bike length or two by riding that just a little bit slower and a little bit cleaner, and potentially seeing, a little bit of experience start to show here with these riders having not necessarily been at the front winning a televised race in the past. These two are definitely going to be really excited for the first race of the year to be pushing it here on the front. But yeah, as you see them come through here now, we'll get some time gaps back to the chase group as they come through to get the bell for the last lap, Magnus.
Yes, 1 lap to go with Aniek van Alphen and Manon Bakker in the lead for the Kriya Shop Freestarts rider team, and looking like it's a done deal. It's going to be a fight between those two. Lucinda Brand here now coming up towards the final corner in a clear third place at the moment. Solid start for Lucinda, I think. Maybe not quite what she was hoping for. I think looking at how much cross training she's put in over the last couple of months, I think she was hoping to have been pushing the pace at the front. But 1 lap to go now.
Yeah, 1 lap to go for these three. But, the thing about it is that this is the first race of the year. Really, the season here, Magnus, doesn't kick off until November with the first World Cup and the Koppenberg race, the first DVV trophy. If you're going for one of the classifications, the Super Prestige will kick off here in a couple of weeks. But really, this is the preseason still. It still does not have an overall classification. There will be no points awarded today. It is, this is a race series that is probably on the rung. It is the third race series after the World Cup, after the Super Prestige and the DVV. Then would be the Ethias Cross. I think each of these races is really prestigious, and they are a collection of races. But with regards to how the riders look at them, there would not be an overall prize to take at this series. So really, they treat these races individually, one by one. So who knows where a rider like Lucinda Brand or Sana Khan is placing this in their preseason training, or where they're putting kind of precedence. I think that for a lot of riders, this is nice. First race of the year to get the cobwebs blown out. If you come out flying, then that's a good sign, right? You might have to feather the form out a little bit, but as you see here, Van Alphen not playing games, really laying down the power in this last 5, 6, 7 minutes of this track.
Yeah, Aniek van Alphen definitely looking very, very strong out here today. As we said, the 21-year-old from Hapert in the Netherlands, looking very strong indeed. Riding through this sand section so nicely.
Absolutely, and they're both technically really good. I like to see this because it definitely looks as though it's almost an improvement on the style and the way that they're treating this course today. It's a technical track. You can see these big ditches that they're having to get through. There is a lot of technicality in this. They're both jumping the barriers back, are able to bring it back, even though Van Alphen's just stretching it out. But it could come down as the pressure starts to mount in this last lap, Magnus. These riders are going to feel that, and they're both both going to want to win, but it's going to be everything that they can to hold one another off. As you see coming into the barriers, this is an area where you could see an error. Let's see what happens here. Boom, over clean, boom, over clean. So both of them not so far over the limit that they're missing their technical ability, so that's good. As they come into this ditch here, come into this more narrow section, Van Alphen still on the front with Bakker closing it down. Now she'll hear that in her ear. She'll know that she hasn't, all this effort that she's put in has not dislodged Manon Bakker.
No, it definitely hasn't. But you see, every little technical section like this, Aniek van Alphen just kicks out of that section, just trying to put Manon Bakker under that little bit of pressure as we're coming up here now to some of these more difficult climbs. Aniek van Alphen still on the front.
Yes, she likes to ride in the front. You can tell that she likes to be up front with Bakker there, though. Bakker's going to note that, though. She's going to know that, and she's going to want to try to get in front of Van Alphen as this course goes. So you can see there, she's taking a little bit of a different line.
Wat misschien helemaal slim was geweest, als ze gewoon die extra push eruit had gedaan. En dat ze dus Aniek voor die balkjes voorbij was gegaan. En dat ze dus dan, weet je, als je weet dat je met die technische gedeeltes net even iets afstand moet nemen, dat je dan juist op kop gaat rijden, waardoor Aniek dan of in moet halen of gewoon niet zo snel kan gaan. Dan kan je een soort van energie sparen. Dat had een strategie kunnen zijn.
Eens kijken of Aniek van Alphen weer naar boven gaat. En dat is wat jij zegt, gaat ze nu doen. Manon Bakker snijdt hier eigenlijk Aniek van Alphen even af. Probeert daarmee haar uit haar ritme te krijgen, dat ze niet omhoog loopt. Want met deze beklimming, ook al ziet het er heel moeilijk en zwaar uit, pakt ze elke keer wel weer een paar meter voorsprong ten opzichte van Bakker. En Bakker weet dat, terwijl we ook de dames gaan inhalen. Kijk, en deze fase, dat ze gelijk op de pedalen kon, terwijl Manon Bakker eventjes moeite moet doen om weer terug op de fiets te schrikken. Dat maakt het verschil. Dat wilde Manon Bakker hier dus technisch wel eventjes voorkomen. Precies wat het moment dat jij dat zei.
Ja, en dat had, als je dat misschien ook al eerder had gedaan. Kijk, nu moet ze weer dat gat dicht fietsen. En dat kost gewoon allemaal extra energie. En dat is zonde. Dus als je dat inderdaad misschien al eerder een paar keer tactisch had uitgevoerd. Dan had je in ieder geval niet zoveel energie hoeven te kosten.
Ja, hier dus op plek nummer 3 Lucinda Brandt. Gevolgd door Denise Betsma. Kijken of Betsma in die laatste minuten van de wedstrijd nog het gat kan dichtrijden. Daar zien we Jara Kastelein, de 5e vrouw in de wedstrijd. Ja, de achtervolgers, gaan die nog problemen opleveren voor bijvoorbeeld een Aniek van Alphen om dus in die technische zones weg te komen?
Ja, dat zou zeker goed kunnen. Normaal gesproken houden zij wel goed afstand. Of maken ze ruimte, want ze horen ook wel dat de koplopers eraan komen. Maar dat kan natuurlijk wel gewoon problemen opleveren. Maar daar gaan we natuurlijk niet vanuit.
Wie van deze twee dames is het snelste? Want als we dan een keertje naar elkaar kijken, dat ze toch aan elkaar gewaagd zijn, dan gaan we toch op weg naar een sprint.
Ja, al twijfel ik daar nog steeds over of dat echt gaat gebeuren. Ik verwacht niet dat het echt een sprint gaat worden. Maar ja, wie het snelste is, ik heb me nog nooit tegen elkaar zien sprinten. Als ze echt, zeg maar, in elkaars wiel gaan, dan ga ik voor Manon Bakker.
En jij zegt van het is nog niet zover dat het een sprint wordt. En dat komt omdat jij denkt dat het nog technisch wordt en dat Aniek van Alphen gaat rijden?
Ik denk dat dit gat al voldoende is, zeg maar. Als je dit gat behoudt, zeg maar, wat is het, 15 meter, 20 meter. Als je daarmee de finishlijn opdraait, dan weet je, ik denk niet dat Aniek Manon nog naar dat wiel laat komen. Maar dat weet ik natuurlijk niet. Hè. We gaan het zien. We zijn hier bijna.
Ja, we gaan er bijna zijn inderdaad. Met Van Alphen die nog eens een keer flink op de pedalen gaat. Terwijl Bakker nog eens even een keer een versnelling groter draait. Die rijdt gewoon een tand zwaarder. Het is de dames, ploeggenoten en toch elkaar onder druk zetten. En ja, Van Alphen maakt het gaatje trap uit trap toch iets groter.
Ja, het is nu al bijna een sprint. Nee, dat lijkt erop. Zo'n gevoel heb ik dat ze echt er alles aan doet om als eerste gewoon alleen over die finishstraat te komen. En het verschil is niet groot. Maar ja, Manon moet nog wel aan het wiel zien te komen. En ik gun het haar van harte, maar het lijkt niet of dat gaat lukken.
Ja, dat zal wel een fantastische prestatie zijn van Aniek van Alphen. De overstap naar deze ploeg heeft haar echt wel de ontwikkeling gegeven in toch een vervelende zomer voor iedereen met het coronavirus.
Ja, super knap van beide dames. Dat is allebei een nieuw team. Dat doen ze echt wel een super knappe prestatie. Ze kijkt even.
Ja, hier komen we dan aan. Aniek van Alphen, de smile staat al op het gezicht. Zij gaat de eerste wedstrijd op Belgische bodem winnen. Dat is een knappe prestatie voor haar. En zeker ook met haar ploeg. Want ook haar ploeggenoten, Manon Bakker, gaat mee het podium op. Hier op de tweede plaats. Zullen zeker content zijn voor elkaar. De dames van Camille van den Berg en de familie Roodhoofd natuurlijk. De Gredi Shop Friestad dames. Het is niet een volledig Gredi Friestad damesploeg. Of dat zometeen op het podium gaat komen. Leek er op het begin van de fase wel op met de Jara Kastelein. Maar wat een verschrikkelijk groot gat is het eigenlijk geworden. Ten opzichte van onder andere deze Denise Betsema. Maar ook Lucinda Brandt. Kijk hier, we gaan richting de 50 seconden, Sanne.
Super groot verschil. En vooral ook voor zo'n relatief jonge dames ten opzichte van Lucinda. Het is echt bijzonder dat zij zo'n prestatie neer hebben gezet.
Lucinda Brandt dus een podiumplek. Derde hier in de Rapencross in Lokeren. Vierde, dat wordt deze Denise Betsema die zeker ook koers mee heeft gemaakt. Maar misschien nog iets aan de conditie moet werken. De nummer 5 gaat Jara Kastelein worden. En daarmee hebben we de top 5 volledig in rood, wit en blauw.